2 Corinthians, Part 2. This ends 4 insight sessions on 1st and 2nd Corinthians. I thought I would just once again go through to kind of remind you about what all is going on here, the many visits and the many letters. It all starts, of course, when Paul goes to Corinth for the first time. He starts the church and stays there for 18 months. This was not a high point for Paul. This was a time of weakness, what he refers to as a time of weakness. He needs to leave. He makes a vow, and he has to go to Jerusalem to fulfill the vow, and then he goes back to Antioch. Those who hold that Paul wrote 4 letters to Corinth, this would be the first letter, that while he's in Antioch, he writes them a letter. It's what we call a missing letter, although some feel that that parentheses in 2 Corinthians is actually that first letter, that they just put it in there. He leaves Antioch and goes to Ephesus, where he's going to spend 3 years. And that's the highlight of his ministry. He is on fire, and God is doing great things through him. Many churches are started. But he hears about Corinth, and he hears about what's happened there, and he's concerned. So he writes what we know as 1 Corinthians. He sends it to them, and it's not received well. He gets word back that they basically rejected his counsel. So he goes there. He gets on a boat, goes right straight across over to Corinth and visits them. A quick trip, but not a good one. They reject him. They rejected his first letter. 1 Corinthians, and they reject him now. He goes back to Ephesus and he thinks about it and he prays about it, and then he writes the scathing letter. He writes them with condemnation. He writes this letter, one that we don't have today. He gives it to Titus. He says, take this to them and then come back and tell me how they responded. They agreed that he would come back through Troas. Paul waits and waits and waits, and he doesn't hear. Titus doesn't come. So he ends up going to Troas thinking that he's there, and he's not. While he's there, revival breaks out, but he hasn't got time for it. He's concentrated. He's thinking about the church at Corinth, and so he gets on a boat and he goes across to Philippi in Macedonia. And there he finds Titus. And Titus says, good news. The people received your letter and they responded. They repented. They were taking care of things. They have a few questions and they're waiting for you to come and to talk to them. Well, Paul can't go right away. He feels a need to visit the churches in Macedonia because of the offering that is being taken. So he knows he is going to be delayed, so he writes this 4th letter, which we call 2 Corinthians. And that brings us up to where we're at. This letter, 2 Corinthians, is his most personal letter. It's where he opens up his life, and you can see inside, and he reveals things about himself. He talks about himself more than any other letter. Matter of fact, more than all of them put together. He talks about himself. He's just overjoyed at what's going on. He talks about the famine. This is a huge famine in Israel. In fact, many historians write about this famine, including Josephus. And the famine is especially bad for the Christians because the Jewish people, because they're a strong family people, the families pull together and help one another. But the Christians have been rejected, pushed out. So Paul realizes that they need their spiritual family to pull in and to help. And so the Gentiles are taking an offering for them. Now it's interesting how God often does this type of thing. When there's a split between believers, you have the Jews who are looking down their nose at the Gentiles, not even sure if they should be coming to Christ and whether they're doing everything that they should. But suddenly they have extreme need. And it's the Gentiles that come to their aid and meet their need, but not out of their abundance. They're not just throwing scraps at them. No, because these Gentile Christians are also going through persecution. They are in need. And in their poverty, they are giving beyond themselves to meet the needs of these Christians that are back in Jerusalem. And this has an impact upon the Gentiles and the Jews, bringing them together. Paul in this letter talks about his thorn in the flesh. What is his thorn in the flesh? I hold that it's his eyesight, that he's nearly blind. I believe that when he had the bright light on the road to Damascus, it blinded him for a while. When he received his sight, it still was not full, and that he had this problem with his eyesight. Some feel that it's many other things and certain diseases that he could have had, which if that's the case, I'm sure he's concerned because he's seeing other people healed from their diseases, and yet he's not healed. And he's asking God, why? Why can't you heal me too? I'll be so much more useful to you if you'll take this thorn in the flesh. God says, no. You're more useful to me with your thorn in the flesh because of all of the revelation that I am giving to you. Well, this ends our time in 1st and 2nd Corinthians. Come back when we give you more insights on the story.